for centuries, and I'm sure that at least one young Englishman has discovered himself in Rome. But here he's claiming the existence of a widespread propaganda campaign that allegedly spanned government, religion, and popular culture about a very specific topic. I'd love to track that down, but he doesn't give me a time frame, a quote, a picture, anything that would help me figure out what he's referring to. I tried many different avenues trying to prove it true, and I just couldn't find anything. And there are comments on that video that are similarly frustrated and lost trying to track this down. Now, he'd also brought up this supposed fact about Italy in a previous video, but with a much more toned-down claim.
This is obvious in early English writings about Italy, where wealthy parents were informed not to let their sons travel there, because the much more sexually fluid Italian Catholic boys would corrupt Englishmen into same-sex engagements.
I'll admit that maybe there's a scrap of truth in there. Italy did decriminalize homosexuality surprisingly early, so probably someone said this about Italy at some point.
Yes, it was you, not me.
Suspiciously, he doesn't mention the associated propaganda that came with it, which I would mention at every opportunity. So, based on that, and the fact that I couldn't find anything, and the lack of corroboration, I'm just going to venture that he made it up. Now, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe it's just an exaggeration rather than a lie, which is why I can't find it. But if it is real, then I will say that as a fellow YouTuber, and one whose videos are much less visual than his, not having these supposed posters and pamphlets on screen is just absolutely terrible video making. If they're real, why would you not include that? Number 5. Disney did a gay charity event and stole the profits.
During the 1990s, Disney's parks also tried profiting from their LGBT fans by creating Gay Night, a one-night-a-year event at the parks where LGBT folk would be the main guests. It was a big hit, and threatened boycotts against the company never seemed to materialize. Initially, the revenue was all to be donated to the Aid for AIDS Foundation, but by 1995, donations to the charity had dried up. Disney was keeping all of the profits for themselves.
Okay, this is a thing that happened, but it wasn't Disney. Disney Gay Days was an informal, unsanctioned event organized by an outside travel agency. They had no official connections to the actual park. It was discovered that the agency wasn't giving the profits to charity like they promised.
It's weird because it's like, I don't think this video is necessary, and I think he's after him because he's homophobic. And it's weird because that's how it came across. I think it's weird because the plagiarism wasn't enough for him. He wanted to pretty much disprove every crazy thing this guy said, and that's cool, but it's a boring video. I'm sorry.
Search goes on in San Francisco for the man known as the...
Thank you, Jason Hesse, for the excellent content from my stream. I'd like to sub to your channel. This is called Deciphering the Zodiac Killer.
Zodiac Killer.
The psychotic killer has already murdered 5.
He claims that he's murdered 13 individuals.
13.
Versus our records reflect 5.
The Zodiac killer seems to crave publicity. He sent letters and cryptograms to newspapers and the police.
Police are now convinced that it was the killer of a San Francisco cab driver who sent in a swatch of bloody cloth with a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle.
This guy is a pathological, psycho killer.
If he had those headaches, Sam.
Since I killed a kid.
School children make fine targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out.
We have no known motive at this time. However, we're not overruling any possibility.
How about leads?
We have several leads that we're working on, and some of them have been expired. We have ruled them out.
No, we're just about in the same position. We're still following a tremendous amount of leads. We're getting a tremendous amount of information every day, not only from the Bay Area, but from all over the nation.
The murders terrorized the Bay Area decades ago, and the killer taunted police by sending letters to the media. But now a team of independent investigators says it has identified the Zodiac killer.
I also killed those kids last year.
Fucking asshole.
Can we put documentary filmmaker instead of YouTuber, unless one of you guys can think of something more pretentious? The Zodiac case was one of the earlier cases at a time that was rife with serial killers in the USA. Between the 1960s and early 80s, there was a multitude of serial killers.
by a killer who's become known as the Night Stalker.
A killer the police are calling the Hillside Strangler.
Design or intent to effect the death of Ted Lisa Levy.
This is where they lived, among the stables, barns, and phony buildings of an old rundown movie location 20 miles from Los Angeles.
Has had 3 of its followers arrested in the investigation of the murder of Sharon Tate and 6 others.
Well, he said, you got me. Police say those words ended the biggest manhunt in New York City history with the capture of Son of Sam.
More bodies unearthed from the basement crawl space of Gacy's Norwood Park Township home today, bringing to 15 the number found there since Friday.
I'm called the Banana, and I look really good.
And there was obviously serial killers outside of that time frame, but there was very much a grouping of them around that time. And specifically in California, it was awash with serial killers. And there was a few reasons for this, all of which added up to the key reason, and that was the fact that it was just easier to get away with murder.
Big city police rejected evidence from small-town cops like Harvey Hines, and police rivalries hampered the Zodiac investigation of possibly 30 murders all over the state.
It wasn't handled as you would handle it today, because I don't think there was the experience there to actually handle it that way. Under today's circumstances, because of the technology we have today that we didn't have then, they would have worked that crime scene for 24 hours. I mean, they would have taken earth samples, they would have looked for fiber, you would have looked for follic hairs, any hair. I mean, it would have been a lot more in-depth just because they have the technology that today that they did not have in those days.
The interdepartmental politics where police would be fighting that a case is theirs and a case is someone else's, along with the fact that DNA evidence just didn't exist and forensics in general was nowhere near what it is today, just made it a lot easier for people to get away with murder back then, and serial killers thrived in that environment. And the Zodiac Killer was one of the most famous, and it got more and more famous as each year where it was unsolved went by.
Between 1968 and 1987, someone calling himself the Zodiac claimed responsibility for up to 40 murders.
He left behind a trail of bodies and taunting letters. Then suddenly the murders stopped.
Oh, am I done finally?
Silent.
Yes, I am. Yeah. This one sucked.
And it became, I think, a battle.
But I mean, I'm more than halfway done now.
And people like Captain Narlow of Napa, who were highly intelligent police officers who really did their best.
And if you watch the 2007 movie Zodiac with Mark Ruffalo, Robert Downey Jr., Jake Gyllenhaal, you would be forgiven for assuming that this case was solved, but it couldn't be further from the truth.
You can't leave me here all alone by myself. I'm helpless. What if a burglar broke in? And you know, they never did catch that Zodiac Killer.
Officially, it remains unsolved.
Yes.
Are people going to be dissatisfied with, I don't want to give them the full ending of the movie away, but dissatisfied with the ending?
Why has he not been caught?
Extremely intelligent. This man has crafted ciphers that have never been broken to this day. A certain amount of luck involved, too. And he's highly skilled.
He's smarter than the cops.
Cryptography, any type of weapons.
A master?
I mean, I'm sure he is, but...
criminal and uncaught to this day.
Still get calls almost daily from people who believe they know who the Zodiac is.
And I think part of its fame as well was definitely helped by the fact that the lead detective on the case was this rock star detective.
For the last 9 years, the Zodiac investigation has been headed by Homicide Inspector David Tusky.
A San Francisco homicide detective and the model of the Dirty Harry movies vowed to catch the Zodiac, but he never did.
You've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
I have always felt a gut feeling that he was not dead and that he was out there somewhere and that he would communicate.
And every man and his dog thought that their father or their dog did it. But this case remained unsolved for a very long time. Now, though, it seems like we are closer than ever to getting a final answer on who the Zodiac is. But to really understand how, why, and who, we need to first go back to where it all begins.
I heard you paint houses.
Yes, sir, I do.
The first murders in this case took place in a very quiet and small town in California called Benicia.
The population was probably around 5,000. It was a sleepy little community, middle class. Crime rate was very, very low.
The first killings and the enduring mystery begin not far from San Francisco. It is late one night, 5 days before Christmas.
In December of 1968, David Faraday took Betty Lou Jensen out on their first date. The two high school students made a fateful choice that night. They went to park in the secluded hills around Benicia, California.
When headlights appear out of the darkness, the car stops behind them.
A man emerged and began blasting a handgun into the driver's door of Faraday's car.
We heard the Benicia Police Department dispatcher put out a call of possible shooting and victims on Lake Herman Road and described the location. My partner and I turned around at that time and responded to the call.
Sergeant, could you briefly describe what apparently happened last night?
Yes, we had a double homicide that took place out on a county road about sometime after 11 o'clock last night. A double homicide involving victims were a 16-year-old girl and a 17-year-old boy.
What were the circumstances involved?
Possibly they were ordered out of the car by the responsible,
forcing the two kids out of the passenger side.
The boy was shot right at the side of the car, and the girl apparently tried to run, and she was shot and found 28 feet further on.
There was one bullet hole that penetrated one of the windows of the car. Was this a stray bullet, or was this one of the bullets that hit the victim and went on through?
This could be a stray bullet or a warning bullet of some sort. We can't connect it with the bodies, but it's the same type of shell.
He reached his gun through the window and shot David as he exited, and Betty Lou was running toward Benicia when he shot her some 26 feet away, 5 times.
He shoots David Faraday as he tries to escape through that door. Betty Lou Jensen is hit with the light beam and the bullets as she runs toward the road.
This was a particularly brutal murder. The killer placed the gun right up against David's skull for the last shot, and then as Betty Lou started running as fast as she could away from the killer, he fired several shots into her back in a very, very close pattern. Whoever did this was clearly a marksman. They knew how to use a gun.
Frightening because it's such a random act, and frustrating because the hunt for the killer turns up nothing.
Obviously, given the fact that there was no known related killings at the time, police were a little bit dumbstruck by what the motive could be for this.
Do you have any idea what the possible motive might be for this killing?
We have no motive at this time.
And within a few days, a picture started to form that this could be drugs related, which was at first thrown out because Betty Lou and David didn't even drink. But there was then a report that came to the attention of the police that David had threatened someone who was pushing drugs in the local area.
This execution-style double homicide took place in Vallejo right at the peak of this wave of violent drug dealing and trafficking by biker gangs.
During that night, we had served a search warrant at what we called the cottage at Lake Herman, which was owned by the city of Benicia. A narcotic search warrant, my partner and I, and we confiscated about 1.5 pounds of marijuana, which, in the 1960s, that was a big drug bust. Today, it wouldn't get very high on the Richter scale.
David Faraday was an Eagle Scout. He received a God and Country Award from the Boy Scouts, one of the highest awards you can receive in the Boy Scouts. He was on the wrestling team.
According to the police reports, witnesses told investigators that a couple of days before he was murdered, that David got into a physical altercation, almost a knockdown, drag-out fight, with this young punk from his high school at the Pancake House on Tennessee Street.
Aggro.
David said, "You're pushing drugs at my school, and I'm going to put a stop to it."
So for the first while after the murder, this is where the police were looking, but that would change.
I think that the FBI statistics are still somewhere in the high 80s. Most victims know their assailant.
The next murders took place in Vallejo, at a place called Blue Rock Springs, which was only about a 6 or 7 minute drive from Lake Herman Road where the first murders took place. Again, another fairly quiet, fairly small and peaceful place.
We never had too many murders. We solved them all, but there was just a few.
Darlene Farron, a 22-year-old waitress, was the next victim. She lived nearby in Vallejo, California, and had gone out with her friend Mike McGough on the night of July 4th, 1969. They were cruising around Vallejo when a car chased them out of town and cornered.
We were chased by this guy, from a restaurant. He was chasing us, and I told her to pull off in the park. He chased me all night long. Restaurant, chased us to a car shop named Paul's, or whatever it was called, and then he chased us all the way to the park, and then that's where I ended up in Blue Rock Springs Park. I thought he drove away, but he came back later on.
And this guy pulled up beside them. Darlene and Mike looked across at him, and apparently Darlene knew who this guy was that was chasing them.
22-year-old Darlene Farron and 19-year-old Mike Mageau believe the man approaching their car is a policeman.
And then suddenly the door flings open, and this crew-cutted man with glasses, a rather pronounced stomach, gets out shining a light into their eyes. They're totally blinded. And Mike had reached for his wallet almost as if he thought it was some sort of policeman. And he fired bullets into the car. And the bullets passed through Mike, who was very badly wounded. He had extensive surgery, but Darlene was killed. He survived.
Mike McGough miraculously survived.
Darlene was shot several times, much more than Michael Mageau.
Like this person really wanted Darlene dead.
This was a pretty brutal murder once again, and most of the bullets were pumped into Darlene. Mike obviously took a few pretty brutal shots, but it seemed like the killer was very focused on Darlene. At least that was what the police and what the reports would say at the time.
And he asked Darlene, "Do you know who that is?" And she said something like, "Never mind."
And the fact is as well that Darlene had been saying to people, including her sister, that there was someone who she was afraid of, someone who basically she apparently had witnessed do something before.
She said that she's seen him do something. She's seen him kill someone.
She never mentioned his name. She said, Richard. I his name is Richard. I get the name Richard.
So the initial thoughts were that someone clearly knew the victim because of how brutal it was, particularly to Darlene. For example, she was out with Mike while her husband was apparently at home with the kids at the time. And Mike has said that he was her boyfriend at the time.
She liked to go out and dance, and I worked nights, and got back to me and they're, "Oh, she's out here whoring around," and I don't believe that. And some of her closer friends said that wasn't true. They're just a group of girls going out.
So there was a lot of intrigue around this idea that it was someone that Darlene knew that was chasing them. And the police officer angle was quite interesting. This was one that was put forward very much by, I think, Graysmith in his book at one point. And that was an interesting one for a few reasons, not least the fact that Mike has admitted in his testimony that they thought it was a police officer behind them. The way the car parked behind them apparently was quite like a police officer. And another part of that theory that would make you think that perhaps this guy has some sort of inside with the police or is police is that according to Mike in Graysmith's book, the door handle on Graysmith's on the passenger side was removed and he couldn't actually get out of the car until the Zodiac opened the door to shoot him. But in the police reports, that door handle was then back, which would mean someone who had access to the crime scene, if that is to be believed.
Graysmith wrote a book about the Zodiac, and he mentioned in his book that I was at Darlene and her husband's house on a house painting party prior to her death, and I don't know anything about that. It wasn't me.
And the officer, I think it was Dick Hoffman, patrol officer, got there first and said he had a shooting. So I took that in the purse, and those things were all put into evidence. When the ambulance left, we told Hoffman to ride in the ambulance and keep trying to get a statement.
Both of them were put in the ambulance, and I rode the ambulance with them.
You knew her before the attack, right?
I never laid eyes on her.
Never laid eyes on her?
No. I'd heard that she was a waitress at an all-night restaurant in Vallejo. But I didn't know the girl at all.
Initially, there was obviously the thought that this was someone she knew. Some of those roads would have pointed, for obvious reasons, to her ex-husband, but there is a variety of other people that could have been involved. Darlene definitely was afraid of someone.
If it's true that Darlene is targeted by a very personal motive, the first person who comes to mind would be the ex-husband, and this particular ex-husband does have a criminal record.
When we first met, she was still married and having a little trouble with her husband and wanted to get out from under him. They lived in a motel on the edge of town, and he wouldn't let her sleep in the bed and slapped her around a little bit.
He owned a car just like the one described by Mike. He was known to be stalking Darlene. In my opinion, Darlene Farron's ex-husband, Jim, is the prime suspect in her murder.
He seemed very capable of doing something like this. He was that strange. He was definitely a weirdo.
All of those thoughts and ideas, though, quickly went out the window after one terrifying phone call.
Then the next call I got was about 12:40.
Vallejo Police Department.
I want to report a double murder.
Yeah, I have your
So
name
1
and where
mile
you're calling.
east on Columbus Parkway, public park, killed by kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye.
Of course, I immediately called for an ID man to go to the phone booth and preserve whatever evidence was possible. And he spent quite a few hours there and recovered literally dozens and dozens of fingerprints that have not been identified to this day. Some of them were so fresh that he had to artificially dry them so that he could lift the print because it was too moist.
Then the case's most famous signature would be introduced.
The killer now sent letters to 3 newspapers: the San Francisco Chronicle, the Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. They were the beginning of a flood of written evidence he would pour forth for years to come. He gave himself a name: Zodiac.
Doing such things as describing what the woman was wearing, enough details to tell the police that he was the man.
Or else.
If you do not print this cipher, I will cruise around all weekend, killing lonely people in the night until I end up with a dozen.
And what did that do to this community?
I guess I got a hard.
3 newspapers.
You know, not really, but.
I mean, that's how terrified they were.
No, I do. I need a
This
hard.
particular code, the Zodiac used.
No,
what
I
we
can't
refer
afford
to
a heart
as
yet. I
common
should just
letter
mail all that stuff.
numeral substitution code, where you might substitute the letter C for E and A for B and et cetera, and coupled with that, he used some symbols that you might describe as being something like semaphore flags, where he'd take a square and color in half of it diagonally, or he used some Greek symbols.
The published codes stumped hundreds of amateur cryptographers and several
Your skill has
intelligence
increased.
agencies.
Police, the CIA, a variety of law enforcement and governmental offices tried to break the cipher that was given with these letters. But it was solved by an unlikely couple, husband and wife, who were teachers in San Francisco.
And finally, Donald Hardin and his wife, who just simply sat down and through sheer stick-to-itiveness worked around the clock. And they were the only ones, the CIA, Naval Intelligence, none of these people were able to crack this 3 cipher code. And this was, certainly for his wife, the very first attempt at any sort of cryptography. For Don Hardin, I think he'd done crossword puzzles. He had some various books on ciphers. But what they had begun to do is they looked for a double combination of symbols, the most common being a double L. And Mrs. Hardin thought that he would use the word kill. And so once they figured the word killing or kill was somewhere, and those were double L's that they were seeing throughout these ciphers, that eventually gave them the key to break it.
I like killing people. It's so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all.
There's an interesting piece in the cipher which is about humans being the most dangerous animal of all, which is a quote from The Dangerous Game. And this definitely stood out to police officers and got them a little bit worried, because at the end of the day, that is a movie about a man who hunts humans, basically for sport. So, a little bit worrying, that.
I'm going to be hunted. No, Miss Trowbridge. Out your chest. His brain against mine. His woodcraft against mine. Only after the kill does man know the true ecstasy of love.
Even with these letters, though, police essentially had nothing.
The status of the case is just about as it was. We're getting many, many letters and telephone calls and everything. There's no specific person that we suspect at this time.
And it was about to get much, much worse.
Hi, Beeb.
Napa's kind of a secluded community. We're bordered on both sides by major highways, Highway 80 to our east and Highway 101 to our west. And so we don't get a lot of the traffic coming through Napa that some of the other cities do. So we have a relatively low crime rate. We can sometimes go several years without a homicide.
Look what I got for our favorite girl.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
I think that particular year we had 5 or 6, which is unusual. There's a lot of activity up in Berryessa during the summer months, but after Labor Day, when all the kids go back to school, it kind of quiets down. And this was September 27th, probably 3.5 weeks after Labor Day. So it was a very, very quiet Saturday evening up there. The weather was nice.
September 27th, 1969. For his new role of executioner, Zodiac chooses a peaceful setting in the heart of California's wine country.
Celia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, both in their early 20s, were sitting on this knoll of land overlooking part of Lake Berryessa. They thought they were alone, but there was a third man on this knoll, a man who wore a medieval-style executioner's hood, carried a knife and gun, and intended to use them.
They were approximately a quarter of a mile from the road, down near the waterfront.
What do you
And they were laying out on a blanket, talking. They were schoolmates. And the subject approached them. They saw the subject come up by them.
I happened to hear some rustling behind us, and I asked her to look, because she was facing that direction. I was facing toward the water. And I asked her to note, what was going on. And she
Shelley's
said,
good. It's so defensive.
She became concerned about it. And I said, well, actually don't worry about it. There's a lot of people, picnickers, etc. And just, if he kept coming, let me know.
Shelley's really good.
She kind of kept watching. I noticed she wasn't following my conversation. She told me he was stepping behind a tree, and the tree was about 30 feet behind us. And when he came out, she said he's got a mask on, and that was my first inkling that there was anything actually wrong going on.
They didn't think too much about it, and the next thing they knew, the subject was upon them with a gun and demanded the keys to the car and money.
And I actually laughed at the moment, because I told him, I says, I've only got 75 cents in my pocket, and I says, you're welcome to have it. I considered him a robber. I had absolutely no thought that he was anything but that. And when we were at this robbery stage, I didn't consider any real threat to my life or to the girl or anything. I really didn't consider this, but I really wanted to help him.
Shelley's really good.
Some, cuts of 3-foot lengths of clothesline. It's actually plastic. It's the kind that's hollow in the center.
The young man stated that, well, you can have my money. I've only got a few cents, 75 or 80 cents. And with this, he says, well, I'm going to tie you up. And he had the young lady tie her friend up, and then he tied the girl up.
He said, well, what I need right now is to get you tied up. And so he had the girl tie me, and of course she was real nervous and tied me rather loosely. And he came and he tightened the knots up, and then he tied her up. And we continued the dialogue along most of this time.
And the kid said, the money's in my pocket. He said, I don't want the money, all I want to do is kill you. The boy asked him, said, you really mean that? And he said, yes, I mean it. Says, well, he said, if you're going to kill me first, because I can't stand to see the girl be stabbed. He said, well, I'll do that. So he started stabbing the kid in the back.
And laid him face down. And with this, he proceeded to knife both of them numerous times.
Still on his knees, the man gave a ghastly, frenzied sound and letting out a long, low exhalation, began stabbing the girl in the back. 10 times the knife fell. Instinctively, Cecilia rolled over on her back, and the dark hunter continued thrusting. Once he plunged the knife, full length, into her chest. Sated at last, the stocky man stood up and tossed the money and keys onto the blanket next to his victims. He walked slowly across the open peninsula and was soon lost in the empty twilight.
Brian will probably be able to leave Queen of the Valley Hospital fairly soon. But where he's going from here is being kept secret in the event that the man who attacked him and killed Cecilia Shepard on Lake Berryessa a week ago Saturday tries again. Brian made it for 2 reasons some people might regard as intangibles, but reasons that for him were enough. A strong faith and an equally strong will to live.
I was able to untie one of her hands, but she was too weak to untie me at that time. Finally, one fisherman who was going real slow, he stopped. He shut off his motor, and we cajoled and called, and we did everything to try to get him to come. And he sat there for about 15 minutes, and he did finally come closer, but he wouldn't come to the shore. I guess he was afraid that the man might still be around. He said he'd go get help. So I encouraged her enough to get me untied, and I got one wrist loose so that I could get the rest untied.
How were you finally found?
Well, she was found down on the blanket still. I made it up about 300 yards up almost to the road, and it was a slow process because I couldn't see. I kept blacking out, and my legs kept getting weak. But I was getting progress. I think I could have made it to the road. But a pickup truck was coming along with these dirt roads, and apparently this man had called for help.
Such a change in crime. He was clearly evolving and getting, let's be honest, much worse.
I've had 11 years patrolling this lake, and I've seen a lot of people cut up by boat accidents and this, but this is one of the worst things I ever witnessed, for no reason at all. Just a hooded man came up with a pistol drawn on him, tied him up, and then told him he had to kill him. So
there had been this theory that Park Ranger Dennis Land was somehow involved in this, and his activities and his actions during and after the crime are definitely cause for suspicion.
Now, there is a person we know was present at the crime scene that day. We know he followed the victims to where they parked their car. We know that he tampered with evidence at the crime scene, and then he happens to match the description of the killer.
Your skill has increased.
Closely. Brian Hartnell said that his first impression of this man was that the killer had come back. That turned out to be Park Ranger Dennis Land.
And while waiting for
your inventory is full
from the Sheriff's Department to arrive, Deputy Land talked to the witnesses that were there and obtained statements from them. I began a search for evidence.
Dennis Land had taken that with him back to the Park Ranger station.
As a professional investigator, I can't explain why any trained officer would touch a crime scene.
I interviewed the officers that was there. One was a park ranger by the name of Dennis Land, and the other one was a park ranger by the name of William White, Bill White, Sergeant. And at that time, Bill White turned over to me some of the articles that were found at the crime scene. Didn't really make me too happy at the time because I couldn't actually go to the crime scene because someone thinking they were doing the good thing and the right thing by protecting it actually bundled up the blanket and the clothing and stuff that was there and took it into his custody at Berryessa Lake Park headquarters. He thought at the time he was doing a very good thing, but at the same time it took us away from the opportunity to actually view the crime scene. So, put it in a few simple words, there wasn't really a crime scene to view.
And records of calls between the station and Dennis Land. At 6:13 p.m., he radioed into the dispatcher that he was going to go 10-7. He was going to go out of radio contact and go check the marina. And 10-8 would mean that he was back in radio contact, which is procedure. But Land never radios at 10-8, so there's a missing time gap of roughly 47 minutes until they get a report of the stabbing at 7 p.m.
One crucial piece of evidence that was found during this was a very unique boot print.
And discovered a footprint that led from Berryessa Knoxville Road to the victims and back again, which was totally separate from the shoes that they were wearing.
And it was determined to be what was referred to as a wing walker shoe that was used primarily with the Navy and the Air Force in maintenance due to the static-free sole in the shoe, so the maintenance people could walk around the wings of aircraft without creating static electricity. So we thought that was a very crucial piece of evidence.
Well, the pictures are in the tape of this last one that they put out. I think it's probably as accurate as any that they have put up.
He was of medium to short height, kind of pouchy, real casual, I don't want to say sloppily, but real casually dressed, of course real dusty from the lake, and he had this black hood on, came clear down to here. Just little slits in the eyes, and where, these clip-on glasses, they were clipped into those little loops.
One thing that's baffling is if you're going to kill somebody, you normally don't wear a mask because you got it in your own mind you're going to kill them, so why do you have to hide your identity? So that's always been a puzzling matter in this case. Why did the Zodiac go through such a effort to make this madness to horrify people if he knew he was going to kill them?
But very quickly there was some clear and evident links that would tie this right back to the prior Zodiac killings.
7:40 p.m., Officer Slate at the Napa Police Department received this call.
Our switchboard was the old cord type that you plug in when a call comes in. The phone rang, and I recall saying, Officer Slate, Napa Police Department. There was a male voice on the other end of the phone, and he said, I want to report a murder.
A double murder. They're 2 miles north of parking headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carpet Kia. I'm the one that did it.
The call to Napa police came within an hour after the stabbings. A young man's voice reported the double murder. He described the couple, their car, the scene, and hung up.
And then the dispatcher knew that the phone was not hung up. It just went silent. And just minutes later, one of the officers said that he had discovered a phone off the hook at this car wash, which was only 5 or 6 blocks from the Napa Police Department.
My first thought was the ranger that had found these young people had stopped someone and said, I can't get out on my radio, would you get to a phone and call and let someone know that what's going on?
While that call was terrifying, for me it does do one thing, and that is assuade the idea that this could have been Dennis Land, because he was at the crime scene with the detectives when that call was placed, and therefore I don't think he could have done it. You could get around that by saying perhaps these killings are done by 2 people, but for me it kind of assuades me away from the idea that Dennis Land had any involvement personally.
I saw the white Carmen Ghia, and I saw tracks leading away from it, which we felt may have been tire tracks from the Zodiac's vehicle.
The 2 front tires were different, which is unusual. Most people buy a set of tires, or at least in pairs, but we had 2 tires that were distinctively different on the front of this vehicle, which kind of led us to believe it was an older model car by someone that probably couldn't afford to keep up the maintenance on the vehicle.
I looked on the passenger door. The circle with the vertical and horizontal line running through it was displayed on the door, and there were several dates, and then it ended with September 27th, 1969, 6:30 p.m. by knife, which was our crime.
It was like an artist signing his work.
Using a felt marker, he writes the dates of all 3 of his attacks, the method of his latest crime, and his ominous trademark.
It was essentially snubbing his nose at law enforcement and basically telling others that, hey, I've been here, I can do what I want, I can do it as often as I want, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's a pretty thin point. You don't see a little OCD, though, with the circles being filled in on the time. You know, if you're in a hurry, you wouldn't do that.
He was into time. You know, he's continually telling us how far something is, how long it's been. He's very specific.
Except this right here is the only thing that really nails down, you know, with some degree of authenticity, we think, the connection between the pieces.
I agree with you.
The killer was evolving. He was getting more brutal. This time he actually talked to the victims. He was experimenting. He was getting far more brutal. This was becoming a big issue for the local area.
There is, as far as I'm concerned, a definite pattern between their killings and ours. And the message left on the side of the victim's door with the dates of the Solano County murders and ours, along with other items that are on there, have definitely indicated to us that they're one and the same.
The asteroid is depleted.
You're pretty much on the verge of finding this man?
Well, I wouldn't want to say that, Dave. We're hoping. We've got some good things working for us, but it takes time, and to be able to reach out and pluck this guy out of the air isn't done. In most murder cases, you'll find a motive, but of course this guy is just a killer, a mad killer, and you have no motive, so it makes it a little bit harder for us to track him down.
In early October, the police interviewed a man who would go on to become the most famous suspect in this case, and the man that I think Hosky and Graysmith very, very quickly set their focus onto, and they still are fairly certain that this is the guy who did it.
There's a retired homicide investigator in Vallejo, California, who thinks he knows who the killer is. His name is Jack Mullinex. 18 years ago, when he was a homicide detective, he was assigned a case involving the Zodiac.
What was your feeling once you got close to him? Did you feel stronger that he was the guy?
I did. I mean, I had the only of all the people that I was involved in investigating the Zodiac. He was the only one that really.
Hey, 13K.
Really turned me on.
I have some money.
The last I heard, he's working in a hardware store in Northern California.
His name is Robert Graysmith, and this man has spent 10 years researching the Zodiac before he wrote a book on it.
He said, I'm Zodiac. And he didn't say, I'm the Zodiac. He said, I'm Zodiac. I can kill these people, and I can kill people and take credit for it.
A school teacher named Arthur Lee Allen. Graysmith has painstakingly compiled a mountain of circumstantial evidence over the years, including witnesses who place Allen at or near every Zodiac murder scene.
To know about Zodiac before there was a Zodiac, to use the symbol, to wear that watch, and to be at the crime scenes, and to know the victims, he would have to be Zodiac. Now, there are a lot of strange theories and things, but it fits one man, it fits one man only.
He liked a children's world. He liked kids. He liked to be a part of that world. He went a little too far with it, obviously. But he enjoyed children, and they loved him.
And later I found out he really was fired for child molestation.
As far as I can tell, Allen seems to be the best suspect they've come up with.
Because there was no evidence, Robert. What do you mean there's no evidence? You have him seen with the ciphers, the military boot prints, the same size shoes and gloves, the most dangerous game, the Zodiac watch, the background of school children, the misspellings of Christmas, the bloody knife. All circumstantial.
And Arthur Lee Allen's choice of very specific boots would also add suspicion to his character in this case.
and it was determined to be what was referred to as a wing walker shoe that was used primarily with the Navy and the Air Force in maintenance due to the static-free sole in the shoe.
Our suspect wears them. It's not just that. He's a size 10 and a half. The shoes that were pressed into the dry sand of Lake Berryessa, size 10 and a half.
After I came in, he showed me the watch, and he was in the process of writing thank you notes and, you know, stuffing them in envelopes and that. And he had a box of stationery items on the table that was handy. He says, "Why don't you stamp some of those envelopes for me?" So I did that.
I can provide a service for your friends, and then take the heat off of you guys. And what are you talking about? Well, I could, you know, there's things I could do, up to and including killing someone.
You know, there was more to Arthur Lee Allen than met the eye. I felt that San Francisco, after they served a search warrant in Sonoma, maybe should have looked at him a little harder. I'm not trying to say anything disparaging about them, but it just seemed like he was more of a viable suspect than they looked at that time.
Personally, I don't think Arthur Lee Allen looked like the sketches in any way. In fact, one of the sketches definitely looks more like me, I think, than Arthur Lee Allen. But that could be explained away very, very quickly.
I look like the description passed out. Only when I do my thing. The rest of the time, I look entirely different.
A couple of years before the Lake Herman, Blue Rock Springs and Lake Berryessa murders back in 1966, there was another case that would eventually end up being very much tied to the Zodiac case, and that was a case that took place in Riverside. Sherry Jo Bates was stabbed to death and nearly decapitated by her killer. She was an athletic girl, a strong girl who was able to fight back. Unfortunately, she couldn't fight off her killer, but she did manage to knock his wristwatch off, which was found by the police, and it was splattered with white paint, which perhaps would allude to the job of the killer at the time. This was the only, at the time at least, unsolved murder in Riverside history. And 6 months later, the police received a letter from supposedly the killer outlining what he had done and taking credit for it. There was a few reasons why this letter would later be tied to the Zodiac, not least because it was signed off with the letter Z, but some instances in it. At one point in the letter he said, "I then finished the job by cutting her throat. I am not sick, I am insane, but that will not stop the game." The fact that he put the game in there obviously was later linked to the fact that he talked about the dangerous game in later letters, but the Z was obviously the big thing that was brought up, but that connection wasn't made until 4 years later by Paul Avery.
6 months later, there are other things that make me think that it's quite possibly him. I received a letter from an individual in Southern California pointing out the similarities. Actually, it was an anonymous letter, and I felt that there might be something to it, so I contacted the Riverside police. They were very cooperative, gave me information on the phone, and then sent me some information, Xerox copies of certain documents. And then they included, kind of as an aside, a letter that had been received 6 months after the Riverside girl had been killed, and said, "This might be of interest to you. It's signed with a Z."
In 2016, according to, I believe, the FBI, someone had called in to a police department or somewhere and basically said that, "Look, that was a prank, I wrote that letter." If that is the case, it was in really, really poor taste, but that would essentially assuade the idea that it was linked to the Zodiac in any way. And there was another case that very much lines up with similarities to the Zodiac case, and that was the 1962 killing of Ray Davis, who was a cab driver, and letters also appeared after that murder. But personally, I think the Ray Davis killing was very much only linked to the Zodiac because of what would happen next. in San Francisco after
The asteroid is depleted.
This has always been known as a city of mystery, and it seems now to have a new and real one on its hands. 5 murders, somebody who says he committed all and will commit yet more.
The latest, a taxi driver in San Francisco. Came here to San Francisco to commit a deliberate murder so that he might garner that attention that had remained so elusive. And with the murder of Paul Stein, he gained that notoriety.
Driver for Yellow Cab in San Francisco picked up a fare in downtown San Francisco, and somewhere en route to the Sunset District, the fare asked him to stop at a certain location, and at that time the Zodiac killer had shot the cab driver.
Zodiac, this is a real departure from his previous assaults. Before this, he ambushes only young couples on remote lovers'
Docking
lane
permission
in the
requested.
suburbs.
Docking request
This time
accepted.
he kills a lone cab driver in a wealthy neighborhood in the big city, trying to prove, it seems, that he can kill anyone, anywhere.
The description that came out over the air was of an NMA, Negro male adult at the time. The only person that could have given that information would have been the child who called it into police dispatch.
What did you see when you came down this road?
My headlights went on to an individual who was walking in the shadow of the trees at the time. The individual I saw that night was a white male adult, approximately 35 to 45 years of age, 5 feet 10 inches tall, 180 to 210 pounds.
Fortunately, as
You've been examined.
They were looking for a black man. They had been given wrong information on the phone.
Since we were looking for a Negro male adult, we proceeded on Jackson Street towards Arguello, continuing our search. And continued on.
Moments later, Fouke's radio corrects the description, but by then, the suspect has disappeared.
As we arrived at Arguello Street, the description of the suspect was changed to a white male adult. Believing that this suspect was possibly the one involved in the shooting, we entered the Presidio of San Francisco and conducted a search on West Pacific Avenue, the opposite side of the wall, the last direction that we observed the suspect going. Did not find the suspect.
Fouke was also very clear as to what the person was wearing. Well, it just so happens that area is extremely well lit, and I cannot imagine his not seeing the shine of blood on the clothing if it had been Zodiac. I feel bad for him if he believes that was the Zodiac. I don't think it was.
He claimed later in a letter that he had been watching the whole time.
Finding one psychopath in this city could be a tall order. This latest communication from the killer who calls himself Zodiac adds very little substantially to the case, except that he may be a conservationist. Ed Leslie, News 13, San Francisco.
It very much seems like he only committed this murder to prove a point, just to get the bloody cloth that he later sent in to the newspapers from Paul Stein's shirt.
Police are now convinced that it was the killer of a San Francisco cab driver who sent in a swatch of bloody cloth with a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle.
And 2 days later, the Chronicle, where I worked then, received a letter from the Zodiac. The envelope was opened. It was addressed to the editor. It was like a letter to the editor. And the secretary who handled that correspondence opened the envelope, saw this blood-stained shirt, and read the letter and rushed it into the executives at the paper.
Over the next several weeks, Zodiac sends 2 more swatches of the bloody shirt along with letters taunting the police for failing to catch him. And he confirms that he was spotted that night by Officer Fouke.
I do feel I second-guessed myself that night.
That you should have stopped him.
Should have stopped and talked to him.
Well, as you can see, the shirt is blood-stained. And what appears happened is that the backside, what would be the tail of this shirt, has been cut out. Incredibly, the Zodiac lingers here at the murder scene for quite a while, collecting his trophies, the cab driver's wallet, his ID. He then calmly walks up Cherry Street. Little does he know that just around the corner, a police squad car is approaching.
All of the letters sent by the killer have been posted from San Francisco, and police believe the man either works or lives in the city. Laboratory tests on the cloth, torn from the shirt of Paul Stein, prove that it came, in fact, from the cab driver when he was murdered last Saturday night in Presidio Heights. And handwriting analysis of a foreboding letter indicates the writer is the same man who's committed 5 murders, 1 here, 3 in Vallejo, and 1 in Napa over the last 10 months. His chilling allusions to future slayings are being countered with an intense drive to prevent him from fulfilling any promises. Dick Carlson reporting for Newsbeat from San Francisco Hall of Justice.
There has also since been suspicion that the Zodiac could live very close by, given the fact that, according to one of his later letters, he was watching the entire thing unfold afterwards as the police were running around looking for him.
You know, if you have a suspect who's living in a house overlooking the crime scene or the search area, then this person can both view the search and also be totally immune from being captured because he's watching from the comfort of his own living room, basically.
In his letters, Zodiac taunts police while admitting that he did remain near the murder scene, watching the police search from the safety of a hiding place.
I enjoy needling the blue pigs. Hey, blue pig. The dogs never came within 2 blocks of me, and they were to the west. The motorcycles went by about 150 feet away.
Nearly 50 years after the first murder, there was still a big push to try and break the codes. They couldn't crack them. The CIA had tried, the FBI had tried, various code breakers had tried. They were eluded by these. And these were 2 codes in general. Z13 because of 13 characters, and likewise Z40. The Z13 in 2017 was thought to have been broken. Apparently, once the Z13 code was broken, the shorter of the 2, it alleged that the name of the person was Kane, K-A-N-E. The FBI, though, very much had their doubts about this and the accuracy of that code break. And the problem with cryptography and encryption and so on is it's very hard to verify something with a small subset. Realistically, it's much easier to verify something long like the 340 code than it is with the 13 code, because you don't have much to compare it to check whether the rest is gibberish. So the FBI still weren't 100% sure that the Kane finding was actually accurate. Back in the late 60s though, while the police were still trying to crack these codes and hunt the killer, things were going from bad to monumentally worse.
School children make fine targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out.
That was the threat of the Zodiac killer. Now, every day, police cars follow the buses which would be likely targets. Officers armed with shotguns take the threat seriously.
The new threat leaves families with school children in fear. Many parents start driving their kids. Police cruisers escort school buses.
Suddenly, everyone in town wants this thing solved, and they want it solved yesterday.
In San Francisco, we have been, since the first day, since the reception of this note, and up to now and continuing, we have a number of plainclothes officers following buses in the morning and in the evening.
You know, if somebody shoots out your tire, don't stop, keep driving. So there was a great panic.
As you can imagine, there was immense pressure on the police to ensure that nothing happened and to get on top of this as quickly as possible. And I think even the word immense there is probably the understatement of the century.
The bus patrol started first in this county Wednesday. Police units from various agencies using marked and unmarked cars follow buses on their runs to and from schools. Assisted by aerial patrols and some buses now equipped with two-way police radios, the massive patrols are responses to the Zodiac killer's threat to stop a bus and shoot children. The patrols are concentrated in the remote sections of the county, similar to areas where 5 were murdered. The Napa School District is the 3rd largest in the state in busing. Its 70 buses travel more than 4,000 miles a day. These patrols have been expanded to several counties. The Highway Patrol has written guidelines for bus drivers.
We have specifically requested that they alert their drivers to not stop under any condition if a shot is fired or if their bus is subjected to a flat tire by the sniper. Further, that they get the children down immediately and proceed with all speed out of the area. And to try and attract all the possible attention by blowing their horns, therefore get out of the situation. We're satisfied that it is all that can reasonably be done under the circumstances that might be present at the particular time, giving due consideration to the vast number of buses operating.
Have any of the drivers expressed any concern over their job now?
Well, there's naturally talk. Everybody's, I guess, tense about it, but they all seem to be in good spirits and all seem to be going on with the job. I don't know of anybody that's quit.
You're not afraid?
No, I'm not. No, not too afraid.
On top of all of this, even worse, there was then a bomb threat thrown in on top of a potential sniper situation.
If you do not want me to have this blast, you must do 2 things. Tell everyone about the bus bomb and all the details. I would like to see some nice Zodiac buttons wandering about town, the face of which says, "I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast."
The killer sent a diagram for an explosive device that was in the hillsides around Napa. And this was working on an electric eye system, where everything else could pass, but a school bus would set this bomb off.
Bomb, as he described it to us in the past, consists of a bomb planted in the street or alongside of a roadside, which would be triggered when a school bus passed by.
He's an absolutely ruthless, completely merciless killer. He doesn't get great excitement over it. He just... somebody like that is going to be a very serious problem for us.
What more do you know about the killer today than you did earlier?
Well, we have progressed. We've been able to come up with more physical evidence that will be able to be used in court. What we have to do is find the suspect, of course, and be able to apply those.
This man is a psychopath that very seriously mentally deranged. He appears to have no remorse after any of the acts. Certainly no reason or even alleged justification for anything that he does. Several of the shootings have occurred without a single word to anybody, just merely to walk up and start shooting. This man is a serious problem to us. Very dangerous.
Thankfully, though, in this matter, for the first time, police were relieved.
After last month's letters and the murder of a cab driver, Zodiac threatened to kill children on a school bus.
The asteroid
so bus
is
guards
depleted.
were provided in many Bay Area counties, including these at Napa. Police say most of those precautions have been halted. And now, in the latest letter, the Zodiac says, if you cops think I'm going to take on a bus the way I stated I was, you deserve to have holes in your heads.
Sadly, though, through all of this, catching the Zodiac.
I'm confident you will get him sooner or later.
Well, of course, that's I feel that about all the things we're involved in. It's our business, and that's our job, and of course, eventually we'll get him.
I'm standing in front of the Vallejo home, which investigators searched last Valentine's Day. The home of the man police have suspected off and on for the last 20 years.
Been interviewed, and the Zodiacs bounced in and out of the news. And through it all, there's been one constant: Arthur Allen.
I'm not the Zodiac killer.
I feel that there are so many areas
that point directly at Arthur Lee Allen that I feel that he is a vital suspect in an all named the Zodiac.
In 1981, there was a case detectives still working on this.
Why did Arthur Lee Allen become prominent again in 1989?
Well, we had a couple of reasons. Primary was that a guy named Ralph Spinelli came forward, and Ralph Spinelli, I knew him well. He was a small-time from Vallejo.
To make things even more exciting for the police, Mike Maggio, one of the survivors of the Zodiac killings, was able to ID a suspect.
I gave him this set of pictures. He looked at it for about 20 seconds, and he said, pointed to Arthur Lee Allen and said, "That's him. That's the man that shot me."
That is mine, but that's my third Carmen Gia.
Oh, your third? According to the affidavit unsealed by a judge late this afternoon, an armed robbery suspect arrested in San Jose last December told police there that Arthur Allen, now 52 years old, is the infamous Zodiac. That information led Vallejo police to obtain a warrant and search Allen's home last Valentine's Day. Police were looking for specific items: 22 caliber pistols, a black executioner-style hood, yellow taxi cab keys. Without revealing everything they found, I learned they did confiscate explosives. Bombs exactly like those the Zodiac serial killer described in the 1960s and early to mid-1970s.
Arthur Lee Allen died just months after this and was never formally arrested or formally a suspect in the case.
So, if we're going to evaluate someone like Arthur Lee Allen, we have to consider all the ways he doesn't match the profile of
the Zodiac, I believe, was a heterosexual male who was attracted to inappropriate women. And Mr. Allen preferred children.
Since his death, though, there was continued intrigue into him as a suspect, and this meant that as the 90s moved on and into the 2000s, new DNA and forensic technology allowed investigators to, with more certainty, decide whether or not he was the Zodiac.
We're hoping to be able to get some genetic information about the individual or individuals that did seal these envelopes or place stamps on them.
Just 50 human cells. Next, Dr. Holt compares the partial profile from the Zodiac letter to a DNA sample from Bay Area schoolteacher Arthur Lee Allen along the top there. You can see they're distinctly different.
Well, based on the Arthur Lee Allen could not have contributed the DNA that I detected on the stamp.
Arthur Lee Allen did not donate the biological material that was recovered from the stamp.
When you write, you rest the heel of your palm, a very characteristic part of it, on the paper. And people in those days that you could leave a palm print and that it could be identified. They knew about fingerprints. And they don't match. That is not Arthur Allen's palm print.
It seems then, at least according to any hard evidence, that Arthur Lee Allen did not commit the Zodiac killings. It seems like the only evidence left is circumstantial. Given the fact that there's no DNA evidence and DNA evidence in the letters and so on exists, that would point to the fact that it just isn't Arthur Lee Allen.
And during an interview here last Friday night with Channel 7 News, Arthur Allen claimed that he is being persecuted by Vallejo police.
And Arthur Lee Allen would go on until his dying breath, adamant that he wasn't the Zodiac killer.
Two types of liars in the world, fishermen and policemen, and not necessarily in that order. Their function is lying to you is to trip you up. They can't do it to me because I have nothing to trip over.
No, I'm certainly, most certainly not the Zodiac killer. They haven't arrested me because they can't prove a thing. I'm not the damn Zodiac. Thank God for our Constitution, because that says a person is innocent until proven guilty.
difficult as hell, and it can be it can be terribly depressing. And if I deserved any of it, that would be something different that I don't.
Michael Finney, Channel 7 News tonight.
So the issue for me personally with Arthur Lee Allen is not the fact that I don't think he's a good suspect. Clearly is not a great person, given he was charged with child molestation as far as I'm aware. It's the fact that we had a living victim, a survivor, who was able to be used at various points to check the voice of the Zodiac Killer against the voice he heard. And at no point, as far as I'm aware, did Brian Hartnell ever point to Arthur Lee Allen as sounding exactly like the man who stabbed him. So that for me was the point where, that for me was the indication that I don't think Arthur Lee Allen did it, or at least he didn't commit the Lake Berryessa stabbings.
I'd like to tell you about somebody a little different from this dark figure, this maniacal killer that seems to come across. He was a bright, interesting guy with a good sense of humor. My mother liked him, my wife liked him, all my kids liked him. But he was not only left-handed literally, but figuratively too. He reminded me, when he was younger at least, of the young man in Catcher in the Rye. He was well-meaning screw-up. He could find more ways to mess up his life than anybody I ever met.
But this is an even bigger problem, isn't it, for the police? Because if not Arthur Lee Allen after all these years, then who?
He was the madman who called himself the Zodiac Killer, and this is the surviving victim who looked him straight in the eye and says she knows who the killer is.
Kathleen Johns was a woman that was down in Central California.
It was late at night. I had left in the evening, and the car behind me started flashing its lights, bright and dim, and the car pulled up behind me, and this guy got out, and he said that my back wheel was wobbly.
That wheel looks like it's not on good.
And she claimed that somebody pulled next to her and said her tire was about to fall off, and then that person took her and her child from her car into their car, drove them around, scared her.
When we would come to any kind of stop sign, he would slow down, but he didn't stop. So I jumped finally, sort of ran into the field.
She was able to jump out on a freeway overpass or entrance lane or something and hide from this person, and ultimately went to the Patterson Police Department.
Just wait and see what happens. You know, he could have stopped at any time and physically been stronger than I was. I was like 7 months pregnant. I had a little kid on my lap.
She was 7 months pregnant with an infant child in her arms and managed to jump from the car and survive while it was moving. Terrifying stuff. Terrifying stuff.
But now, one determined cop says he knows exactly who the killer is and where he's hiding. Doug Bruckner has the story.
She did offer up a clue to the investigators, though. A very, very interesting one.
He says it's her eyewitness account that proves his suspect is in fact the Zodiac.
Detective Harvey Hines of Escalon says his analysis of these cryptic symbols reveals the Zodiac's name is Cain.
We also have another clue. He installed another clue in the cryptogram. It reads name Cain or name Cain, C-A-N-E, reading from right to left.
She saw him and put her finger down on the picture and said that was him. And she said, it's not only my eyes telling me, it's my stomach too.
Indeed, there is a man who used the name Cain, who has a criminal record, who was born in 1924. He's an ex-mental patient who fits the profile of the Zodiac Killer. The man called Cain now lives in rural Northern California, but he hasn't been arrested.
Later, he would be linked to another crime where Donna Lass, an employee in a hotel where Cain worked in Lake Tahoe, went missing and was never seen again. And she was seen last in that area. And a postcard, supposedly from Zodiac, was sent later on from that area, from Forest Pines.
The limit of my knowledge about the girl at Lake Tahoe, and we discussed that at the time that we were talking during the investigation of Benalik, is that she was a nurse, that she got off duty at a casino up there, and ostensibly that's the last time anybody saw her. And the similarity between that and Judith Akari is that Miss Akari was a nurse, and within reason she got off duty. She was followed by a fellow employee to a certain, location, and she was never seen again.
I understand there was also a similarity in the way the parked cars were found.
Now, the car in the girl in Lake Tahoe was apparently found, and I just learned that today, it was apparently found in her parking stall in front of her apartment or her cabin or wherever her place of residence was. And Miss Akari's automobile was found in its parking spot in front of her apartment.
And there is a link between the Riverside case and the Kathleen Johns case, and that is the fact that in the Riverside case, the killer did actually disable her Volkswagen Beetle by removing the distributor coil and the condenser so that the car wouldn't start. And then, according to a later letter, if it is to be believed, and according to police in general, it seems likely that the killer offered her help to get to wherever she was going, and that's how he got her in the car. And this was similar to the Kathleen Johns case, where he decided to help with the wheel, but then went and loosened the wheel. There was never enough evidence, though, to either tie this to Zodiac or on Kane in general, and Kane was never treated as a official police suspect of the case in either situation. One of the most bizarre parts of this case, though, is definitely the call-in show.
Zodiac, a symbol that now stands for terror in San Francisco. Today there was a possibly significant development in the terrifying case of the man who calls himself Zodiac.
Inspector Attorney Melvin Belli's office has said that it has been contacted by a person claiming to be the Zodiac. Have you been able to verify that the letter received by his office is authentic?
Yes, we have. This has been done by our crime lab.
The asteroid is
Basically,
depleted.
it was a letter written to Mr. Belli, which was a personal type letter, and again, at this point of the investigation, I would not want to comment on the particular details of the contents of this letter.
This bizarre situation began at 2 o'clock this morning when the so-called Zodiac telephoned police headquarters. He said he was sick, he needed help, and he wanted to talk to Belli on television. All the scheduled guests were canceled from the show on the ABC station KGO. Belli waited for Zodiac to call on the private line. The phone was not tapped. The killer telephoned 12 times. He spoke very little, with Attorney Belli trying to draw him out.
Just tell us what's going on inside you right now, please.
I have headache.
There was one moment when he talked about killing kids that I still remember with a shiver.
I want to kill those kids.
He calls back 11 times.
How long have you had those headaches, Sam? In a long time? Since I killed a kid.
Talk to us. Just tell us what's going on inside you right now, Sam, please.
I have headache. Right. Were you in service that you might have had an injury in service? Did you ever fall out of a tree or downstairs? Were you ever unconscious? I don't know. You don't remember?
So no one knows yet if they had the Zodiac killer on the phone. They'll have witnesses listen to a tape of the broadcast to determine that. But it seems that a solution to the 5 Zodiac murders is just as far away as it was before. Spencer Michaels, KCRA News, San Francisco.
The supposed Zodiac afterwards even offered to meet up, but never showed.
Belli finally arranged to meet Zodiac in Daly City, a suburb south of San Francisco, to talk in person. The attorney waited in an office building, but Zodiac never showed. I asked Belli if he thought the man who called really was the Zodiac killer.
Negative. I can't say. All I can say is this man needed help. This man seemed like a man who was coming up to a storm or to a climax, and this very blood-curdling thing. Children kill, and then there's sort of an agonized cutoff, enough to turn your hair whiter than mine.
So inside the thrift shop, St. Vincent de Paul, attorney Melvin Belli and the San Francisco police waited for the Zodiac killer. The man did not show, so now all we can do is wait perhaps for that next phone call from the man who calls himself Zodiac, who has killed 5 and says he's going to kill again. Dick Shoemaker, ABC News, San Francisco.
Nothing came of that. We went out to the location where the meet was to have been. Mr. Belli was out there, Mr. Dunbar was out there, and nobody appeared.
Can you tell us where that was?
It was in the, a little out of San Francisco, in the outer end of the Mission District.
Do you explain that he was the Zodiac with all that program?
Not necessarily. I listened to the program.
Come on, man.
Opinion,
What are you doing?
For what it's worth, my opinion is that this is no hoaxer, no prankster. The man on that show, I sincerely believe, has a problem, has a mental problem, but he may or may not have been the so-called Zodiac person.
I hope you're having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That's part of the chilling taunt from one of the Bay Area's most notorious serial killers, now decoded after 51 years.
A major break in the case came in 2021 when the Z340 cipher was finally cracked.
This major development in the case comes decades after that coded message was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle in November of 1969, and many hope it will help identify the serial killer.
A coded 340-character message sent to the San Francisco Chronicle from the infamous Zodiac killer of the 1960s, cracked by a group of amateur code breakers. In a statement, the Bureau said the FBI is aware that a cipher attributed to the Zodiac killer was recently solved by private citizens.
We tried several 100,000 incorrect ways of solving the cipher, and just by chance we happened to sort of stumble upon a fragment of how it could be solved, and using that fragment we reverse engineered the entire solution and got the entire message out from the Zodiac.
Sadly, though, there was no name to be found in this cipher.
Fagan said there had been hope that the killer would reveal his identity in one of his coded messages.
This one didn't do the trick. It doesn't reveal his identity. It doesn't give a lot of clues to his identity. I think more what it does is the method that he was able to use
shit, I didn't know this
create
was here.
that cipher
wow.
may help track down who he is.
Oh,
That
wow.
the Zodiac was encrypting is replaced with
That makes
multiple
this place
symbols.
a lot better.
It
That's
did,
cool.
though, confirm what Brian Hartnell had said years and years ago. The voice who called in to the Jim Dunbar show wasn't, in fact, the killer. And in the cipher, it said it wasn't me on the TV show.
At one point in time, I was asked to go down and listen to a tape of an interview that had been on the Jim Dunbar show. And if I recall correctly, Melvin Belli was asked to come to the Jim Dunbar show. And so I was asked to listen to the voice, and there was some interaction between Melvin Belli and Jim Dunbar. My recollection of that voice is that wasn't even in the range of what I'd heard. I think I told him that I didn't think that was the voice.
After no new letters, contact, or information since 1974, police finally got another break in the case with a letter sent in by the supposed Zodiac in 1978.
This letter from the Zodiac poses more questions than it answers. Questions like, why has he only communicated twice in the past 9 years? Has he killed in that time? No clues in the latest letter. But more importantly, who is the Zodiac and where is he?
Every time the Zodiac would send us a letter, we were spurred on because we gleaned a little bit of intelligence information out of every letter that he sent us. And we just hoped that we could latch on to one little thing that might lead us to the Zodiac killer. We knew an awful lot about this killer.
But in 1978, April 25th, I believe, we got a letter that says, I am back with you. I've never been anywhere else. I've been with you all this time.
San Francisco police displayed a blackboard with excerpts of the latest Zodiac letter at a news conference last night. Police are convinced it's authentic. Deputy San Francisco Police Chief Clem D'Amica said it's the 16th letter received from the Zodiac killer.
However, there was more to this 1978 letter than meets the eye.
Towards the end, I don't know, if we were getting some letters that turned out not to be authentic Zodiac letters, and I believe the last time we heard from him with an authenticated letter was in April of 1974.
For the first time since the Zodiac case began 9 years ago, Inspector Dave Toski is out of it. Toski is under fire for writing phony fan letters about himself to a newspaper feature writer. Armistead
Oh
and
my
Mopan.
God.
And Mopan today came up with far more serious charges, that there are similarities between the letters Toschi admits writing to Mopan and the most recent Zodiac letter of last April.
And that was it. Toschi was off the case and close to losing his career after being one of the most famous detectives only a decade earlier.
Toschi admits writing the fan letters to Mopan, but vigorously denies having anything to do with the letters purporting to come from the killer known as Zodiac. Toschi was low profile at the Hall of Justice today. He had been officially reprimanded over the fan letters by being transferred from the homicide detail to the pawn shop detail. And an official investigation is underway on any connection he might have with the Zodiac letters. Thus far, the experts can't agree on the authenticity of the last letter from the Zodiac. Right now, Toschi has admitted to nothing more than being guilty of an indiscretion.
As technology moved forward, the case continued on in the background, and investigators struggled to find more and more evidence. Thankfully though, technology also got better and they had more DNA at their disposal to either put more pressure on certain suspects or completely clear them from their list.
Careful as he was, it's unlikely that 33 years ago, Zodiac would worry about leaving behind a genetic trail. Could this tiny strand bear Zodiac's DNA fingerprint? She examines it, but again, no luck.
Now you have a lot more to work with. It's got to be exciting.
Well, the potential is exciting. The potential is higher now that we have 3 more envelopes, several more stamps.
Exciting because Homicide Inspector Kelly Carroll and his partner Mike Maloney can then compare it with DNA samples from anyone suggested as a possible suspect, something the original Zodiac investigators could only have dreamed of.
From all of your investigations, what can you tell us about the Zodiac?
Not a great deal. He's not an unintelligent man by a long shot. His paragraphing, his phrasing, his punctuation is very good. I'm sure he has deliberately misspelled words in an attempt to lead us to believe that he's illiterate, but in so doing, why
But he is
led us to the point that we believe just the opposite.
He was a cipher.
Disappointment is followed quickly by a possible breakthrough. Remember that taunting greeting card? Dr. Holt gets a tentative result from the outside of the envelope that contained it.
I can tell you that there is an indication that there may be DNA from one of the stamps.
You could well be on the trail of the Zodiac.
Well, the prospect of being able to contribute to the story is exciting.
Then, out of the blue, more good news for Dr. Holt. Our primetime investigation of the case leads to a major discovery. 3 more Zodiac envelopes in mint condition. They quietly arrive at the lab after our inquiries with a retired police source. He had kept them in his personal files.
And I think that after the Golden State Killer was caught in 2021, investigators more than ever that they could potentially do the same thing with Zodiac and catch him while he was alive.
That bombshell arrest, that former police officer who authorities went on a reign of terror for so many years. The numbers, as I mentioned, are simply staggering. At least 12 murders, 45 rapes. They say this is their man, Joseph D'Angelo, now 72, arrested outside his home. They surprised him. He spent years as a California police officer. He'd been married.
Law enforcement now identifying 72-year-old Joseph James D'Angelo as the Golden State Killer. But D'Angelo not a suspect until days ago when they got a break. They say cutting-edge DNA testing allowed them to make a match.
Now though, in 2023, as each year passes by, it becomes less and less likely that they'll catch this man alive.
It's at the top right screen, but you seem to get my mouse on it right away.
Claims
It's
that
so
it has
annoying.
identified the Zodiac killer.
A group of independent cold case investigators claims they have solved the more than 50-year-old mystery of the Zodiac killer.
It is made up of former FBI agents, military officials, and forensic investigators from all across the country, and they say they're confident they have solved this mystery.
How good is Dawn?
The case now, though, might finally be closer to being solved than it ever has before.
But going to the library, that's simple. The Bay Area phone book to put him in the Bay Area at the right times.
And there was just no way you could get around it that it wasn't this person. Everything matched up, including stuff that wasn't public that we had kind of found and talked to.
The long unsolved Zodiac killer case and a high-profile announcement putting a name to the suspect's face. It's no surprise for this Sacramento investigator and attorney.
The group says Post had scars on his forehead from a car crash that matched scars on a sketch of Zodiac.
That is irrefutable. That is a mark that's the same. It's on him all the way to his death at 80 years old.
The case breakers point to Gary Post, an Air Force veteran and house painter who died in 2018.
We have 6 people that he told towards his last years that he was the Zodiac.
The group says evidence like a shoe size match, court affidavits, matching facial features, and a clue that the killer hid his name in those ciphers proves their ID.
His name is Post. He ended it with the stamp, and they couldn't figure out his last name. He cleverly used the post markings as Gary Francis Stamp. Post.
And it's more than just this little riddle or the code that was sent to the San Francisco Chronicle. They have the scars apparently on, Post's forehead that match the drawing of the Zodiac killer. And they've even gone so far as to interview Post's neighbor, who says that she believed that Post was the Zodiac killer. So they've done an outstanding job, and it's interesting. First, obviously, we dealt with Bob Durst after 40 years, and now more than 50 years, we're getting close to identifying the Zodiac killer. Obviously, he's passed. If it is indeed Post, he's not going to face the same justice that Bob Durst did.
It's a good feeling, but there was a bit of, sadness to it that we actually, when he was still alive, were talking to individuals in law enforcement about, we were confident it was him.
Sacramento attorney Mark Reichel and his longtime investigator John Kennedy named Gary Post as the likely Zodiac killer years ago after their own lengthy investigation.
This is the radar station where he worked.
Kennedy showed me the digital files of his own Zodiac killer investigation tied to Gary Post, compiling records where Post was stationed in the Air Force before the Zodiac killer spree in the 50s.
And in these places, there were encrypted messages being sent and received.
And where Post may have picked up a knack for codes. Kennedy also found a news clipping of a deadly car crash Post was involved in just outside the base. So Mark Reichel and John Kennedy, while they believe that Post is in fact the Zodiac killer, they do acknowledge that the evidence that they have is circumstantial. They look forward to the day that science will prove them right.
Expert like myself who has had contact with members within the Bureau that said that since 2016, Gary Francis was their suspect.
Stop.
Releasing this evidence, even when the FBI confirms whether or not they are accurate using the database of evidence that the FBI has on this case.
Some aren't convinced.
I woke up this morning, I really thought it was April 1st.
Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com calls the claims hot garbage and says the theories presented are thin.
Who are we to say yay or nay?
San Francisco Chronicle reporter Kevin Fagan's been covering the Zodiac case for years. He says he's not so sure Post is the right guy.
I got an email 2 weeks ago saying that they found Herb Cain's name in the anagram, so Herb Cain must be the Zodiac. Before that, it was Charlie Manson.
Back in December, the FBI confirmed
He's
that
level
the
24,
Zodiac
that's not
cipher
bad.
had been cracked by code breakers. His message said in part, "I hope you're having lots of fun in trying to catch me, and I'm not afraid of the gas chamber."
Now, I did reach out to the San Francisco Police Department and the FBI, and they both told me that this case remains open. They have not confirmed the theory presented by the case breakers today, so at least for now, the mystery continues.
Until then, we can only ponder. But I, for one, have always been of the opinion that this is most likely a gun-for-hire type. A man who is hired to commit murders on the behalf of others. And he cleverly used the letters to make this look like a serial killer instead of a gun for hire.
The San Francisco police say the Zodiac case is still open, but it's not actively under investigation. In fact, many of the files in the case have been stored in Sacramento, and the original detectives in the case have retired.
And I think given that that's been my opinion on it, that makes the idea of Post, who was a house painter, even more poetic.
And then I started painting houses.
Oh, it over. It's over. Yeah, it was good. It was pretty good. I liked it. It was, I learned. Yeah, we're gonna feed you too. Hold on. I mean, I guess I could drag this corpse in there, but liable to get ganked if I do that. I'd rather just feed him out here and get him going. First time, I'll just... Yep. I got no skill up off that. Oh no, increase to 99, I see. Yeah, it's like a little bit better, yeah. I wish the print wasn't so small. Yeah, this wasn't it, really. It's low, 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 epic, low. TSR should be epic, and the TSR balance should be ultra performance, and foliage should be high. Right. Save. Let's see if we can get that, as if that feels better. Like a little bit better. Let's feed the wolf before he leaves me. Nice, he ate like 1,000 pig meat. Let's stab this pig. Oh, before I do that, we want all pets attack, all pets follow, and then all pets stay should be way at the end. But yeah, like follow and okay. And what else is there in there? It's like all pets bags. Oh, there's a bag. So wait, you can open a pet's bag. Oh yeah, but I don't want that on the bar. I want like there, like all pets defensive. Oh, attack back if attacked. All pets to never attack. So defensive, bags, defensive, passive, stay. Okay, so let's stab the pig. The pig seems blurry to me. And I think it's because of the... Actually, I like the global illumination too. That wouldn't be bad. The post-processing probably should be high, and the effects should be high. And the TSR quality... This seems about right for a main game, yeah. We'll see how this runs. Alright, pig. Oh, oops. And we'll butcher these corpses. Good pig. I guess I'll have to butcher that one. Let's go find a movie before, or a video before, Dark Truth. Rockefeller, the world's first billionaire, deciphering the Zodiac Killer. The horrors of becoming lost. I like that guy. Yeah, it was good. It was good. He did well here.
In the gym.
Yeah, this was interesting, but no. Let's go back to... Oh, no, I want to watch that one. Nope. Seth Greensosh did a new one. Let's watch that.
Hey, Lactation Nation, Seth here. In the not-so-distant future, man no longer fears the tyranny of a state, as sovereign nations have been abolished. For we found the best form of government.
Far Cry 2?
Anarcho-capitalism. Whenever anarcho-capitalism is mentioned to me in conversation, it's usually followed by repealing the age of consent. But in this case, it simply means everything and everyone in this entire solar system is corporate property. Quasimorph is an early access roguelike where you take the role of Magnum PMC, a private military contractor with flexible morality that does work for the highest bidder. The twist is, the world is over, Judgment Day is here, and we're all going to die. And we've chosen to profit from the chaos. But first, a word from our sponsor, because I gotta get that bread. Whoops, sorry guys, my PC crashed again. I had a single Chrome tab open, so my computer caught fire, burned down my house, and killed my wife's son. Thankfully, today's video is sponsored by Opera GX. It's no small secret that modern web browsers are massive resource hogs. They always say, just upgrade your rig, bro. But you know what? No, I'm using Opera's GX control feature to limit how much CPU and RAM the browser can use, so I can game uninterrupted no matter how many memory leaks Elon adds to Twitter. Opera GX is extremely modern. Check out this one that I made. I've heard your cries, your demands. More, Seth. We want more, Seth. Well, now you've got me with every single keystroke. I'll be there, stroking right alongside
52.
you. Oh, you don't like that? You just want the themed wallpaper? Opera GX once again has you covered. You can fully customize which features come from which mods. And with a plethora of excellent mods on the store page, your browser can be whatever you want it to be. Check this out. By tweaking the music, keyboard sounds, tab sounds, theme, wallpaper, and custom shader, I've created the ultimate web browsing experience. Music to my ears. Now, I know what you're thinking, Seth, this browser sounds pretty cool and all, but switching browsers is such a pain. Worry not, Opera GX has an import tool to quickly download all your settings, history, bookmarks, and passwords in just one click. Use my link to download Opera GX today and say goodbye to all those pesky, boring, other browsers. To answer the question, what is a quasimorph? Sometimes the most accurate answer is the schizophrenic one. The setting of quasimorph stems from the esoteric metamythos of Daniil Andreev in his book Rose of the World, which describes Shadanakar, or the systems of parallel worlds connected to Earth. These concentric layers are Brahmfuturas, the superimposition, influence, and overlap of which formulate together to create existence. At least I think so. Quasimorph is an intruder stepping in from another reality, and unfortunately, the veil between worlds is weakest between your chest cavity. Quasimorph is a turn-based survival extraction shooter, or in other words,
turn-based
2D
survival
escape from Tarkov,
extraction
except
shooter.
fun. The principle is very simple. We take out a contract and send in one of our agents. If they die, no problem. They're not really any more people than they are proprietary neuro imprints. We license their consciousness, and we bioprint as many replacements necessary for total client satisfaction. You're free to take jobs from any of the major corporations, including the Quasimorphs. We may be locked in an existential war for humanity, but that doesn't stop me from holding stock in Sectland. Rapture is coming, but homie, I got some great dividends. And you start with a favorable reputation. After all, you did help them entrench into this reality. You start a mission by selecting an active contract around the planet or moon you're currently orbiting. This requires you to select a mercenary, a class, and a loadout for the mission, after which you're deployed into hostile territory. Anyone you see, anything that moves, is kill on sight. An entire mission is 2 to 4 levels. If you change your mind midway and call the shuttle, fuel is expensive, so it's cheaper to let you die. The only way to extract is by completing the objective, which can be espionage, station defense, sabotage, elimination, or conquest. If you die anywhere in between, you lose everything. And I assure you, you're going to be dying a lot. If it's any consolation, I died during the tutorial because I picked up a knife, selected amputate, and clicked on my head. Each deployment is on a timer. The more time you spend, the more blood you spill, the higher your level of quasimorphosis. Quasimorphosis measures the probability of ecolapse, where, upon death, the host explodes and a quasimorph phases in. The severity of the situation is described in the bottom right. Somnia, no events. Grasp, occasional ecolapse. Intrusion, music changes, ecolapse, and aggression increase. Plenum, spontaneous ecolapse. Alteration, the entire floor is coming. Morphose, music changes to its highest intensity every experience. And finally, rapture. If you want to live, you'll keep this number as low as possible. Naturally, there's only a few ways to do this: drinking vodka, smoking Newports, and injecting morphine. Each time you move, you consume calories. At higher weights, this is 9 calories per step. This is what Americans really believe, and to avoid you need a steady supply of slop. But when the food runs out, I want you to consider alternative sources. When I consume my enemies, is it really cannibalism? For that implies I considered them human to begin with. Unfortunately, human flesh will raise your quasi-morphosis. You delay one death and accelerate another. However, if you find a crafting bench and an empty tin, you can turn that long pig into gourmet dinner, which will no longer cause quasi-morphosis. The implication being that it's not about devouring your fellow man, it's about table manners. Disclaimer, they patched the canned meat. It's so over. On the other hand, they improved the crafting bench so much you have no idea. We are so back. In general, the crafting bench will save a lot of your early game runs. Don't sleep on it. Improvised toilet grenades clear rooms, makeshift batteries power autodocs and floor scanners. Completing a mission gives rewards, but more importantly, reputation. You can land at any corporate asset so long as it's friendly and exchange goods for equipment. And if you're completely broke but friendly with Techland, you can even exchange yourself by amputating your own limbs. This is not a joke. It's a completely valid strategy to potato peel your digits, offer them at the Fever Temple, regenerate your limbs on the ship, and do it all over again. It's not efficient, but we can no longer exploit bloodbath synthesis. They caught on to us, boys. It was good while it lasted. Speaking of which, the Magnum can fabricate almost everything, so long as you have the proprietary item chip. These are effectively a perpetual license, and are so incredibly valuable that finding one during a mission is a valid reason for evacuation. There's also class and mine chips, which unlock classes and mercenaries respectively. If you mouse over a chip and you see the words data miner, you've officially hit the jackpot. You can do whatever you want, but remember, your actions have consequences. Supporting a corporation will accelerate their growth in technology. If you want top-shelf gear, great. But if you turn against them in the future, you're not going to be facing wage slaves and general managers. You'll be facing rival PMCs and their own special forces. So I encourage you, pick a side, any side, and stick to it. There's a lot of minor corporations, but for the sake of time, here's the big players. SBN, social media monopoly. They own Twitter, the best energy rifles, and the lightest armor. RealWare, industrial mega manufacturer. Carnage Pattern is objectively the coolest armor, and they produce the highest RPM ballistics. Ancom, entertainment and research conglomerate. They make the most versatile armor, the best snipers, and the experimental HFC, this game's equivalent of Doom's BFG. Testlan, quasimorphs from Venus that'll make you rage quit at least several times. Everything is Aztec, from the design to the desire for human organs. And finally, the Civil Resistance. These are terrorists that hope to bring about something even worse than Judgment Day. A return to national sovereignty. They intentionally hive-mind themselves into a cluster of consciousness known as a call node. In effect, they have achieved working communism. Anyway, you understand the politics of our PMC, let's return to the actual mechanics. It's very tempting to finish the tutorial and go straight to the moon. Somehow, I avoided this so I didn't get filtered by a wheelchair. Quasimorphosis is unique to each planet because they're subject to the influence of a different brown fatura. Venus, Ganix, Mercury, Shartamacum, and the Earth's moon, Duger. Mars and its moons have absentia, which means there is no quasimorphosis. So, if you're starting off, I recommend Mars. If you're learning, try Mercury and Venus. And if you know what you're doing, go to the moon. That doesn't mean any single location is safe, and death is around every corner. Most common cause of death: flamethrowers, not in the hands of enemies, but myself. An entire run, gone in a flash because some unpaid worker amputated your neck with a circular saw. I assumed the weapon was busted, so I tried it myself, in a straight line, where it ricocheted and cut my legs clean off. When you take damage, you get injuries, which have to be treated, or they get infected.
Oh, wow.
And if there's no antibiotics on hand, well, it has to go. Secondly, the most common cause of getting filtered: pain shock. If you take too much damage too quickly, you
stole
get
my
stunned
bandages,
and
you
lose a turn.
fucking
Both
dick.
systems are universal. If you shoot something hard enough, they'll get stunned from the shock. If you cause injury, you can run away as they bleed to death. And if you amputate a critical organ, they might just die instantaneously. The number of action points you can take per turn is based on your move setting. At any time, you can switch between sneak, normal, and run. Sneak is one action point, but can detect the position of nearby enemies, use your inventory, and interact with nearby objects at no cost. Normal is 2 action points, and run is free. However, while running, you can't open your inventory and take a severe penalty to your accuracy. Peak performance requires that you abuse the system. Opening a door, switch to sneak, see enemies, switch to normal, and toss a grenade, before switching back and locking it on the same turn. A lot of players have a tendency to go autopilot in sneak mode and just die without explanation. What usually happens is they turn a sharp corner, get their shit blasted in, but because they have a single action point point, they go into pain shock, which rolls over to the next turn, where they get shot again, and repeat the process until they die. The whole point of running is to face check. Understand your tools, and you'll find this to be a very satisfying tactical experience. I used to have complaints about this game, but after so many hours, I can tell you, if you die, it's a skill issue. I have a brain parasite, and it forces me to play this game at 2 times speed of cheat engine. That's a personal choice. I also use a macro to amputate every corpse. After 100 hours playtime, that's a necessity. Classes work like a perk system, and each mercenary has an intrinsic perk. This unique ability combines with your class of choice to create vastly different play styles. For example, Percy comes with +5 to all resistance. Outfitted with full carnage pattern, he's the only person in the game that can set himself on fire and not take damage. And after putting him in Phoenix Brigade, I can shoot a single round of incendiary ammunition and burn down half the map. In general, you should pick a mercenary that suits your playstyle. Do you want to feast on human flesh? Play Isabella, because she's immune to infection. Even better, put her as Eclipse Blades and turn your cannibalism into a one-hit kill.
Oh, no.
Are you tired of getting stun-locked? Try Maximilian, because he doesn't feel pain. Would you like a slower pace? Play Mirza, because her caloric needs are 40% of everyone else. Are you tired of scraping by? Would you like to quadruple everyone's inventory to the point where every enemy contains 2 flavors of ramen and a pack of Lucky Strikes? Play Tunnel Rats and experience the greatest whiplash in difficulty, as everything that doesn't die to your shotgun gets knocked back into the void of space. I've discussed builds. Let's talk about guns, because there's a lot of them. If you want to kill enemies, you need to beat their resistance, and the type of damage you do is based on the ammunition. Flamethrowers and energy rifles cook organics, but have no effect on cyborgs. In contrast, the buckshot of a shotgun will cut them to pieces. Most armor stops the blunt impact of a 9mm, but a 7.97 from an assault rifle will pierce right through. Quasimorphic weapons deal cold. Even if you're fully equipped, the full burst of a serpent's mouth will send you straight back to the menu. And poison was previously neglected, now it's a complete menace. Also, there's turrets, very incredibly useful for defense missions, and because an enemy ran right up to your face, shooting you in the crossfire. And finally, you might be asking yourself, what's that little icon on the bottom right? Don't worry about it. Anyways, that's the structure of this video. So in conclusion, I give this game a self-inflicted out of 10. It's amazing. I know it's early access, but there's a lot of content already, and you can easily sink 80 hours on just the main gameplay loop. There's an impressive roadmap and features to come that I cannot disclose at this time because I promised I wouldn't tell. As always, more content to come next year because I gotta see my family. Merry Christmas! A warm thanks to the many members of the Merchants Guild generously funding and bankrolling these videos consistently for several years. You're all truly wonderful, and you give me more than I deserve. And you won't stop asking me to take your money, so I will. In exchange, enjoy the outro.
Loud. Accept, damn it. Yeah. Go. Let's go. Go, go. Okay, you. Come on, man. Get out of the way. Ugh. He's gonna gank me. Fuck it. I'll maintain my distance. Like, I don't need to fuck around here. I'm gonna stop my business here. Fucking, yep, you come around that way, huh? Yep, are they chasing me or what?
The asteroid is depleted.
Okay, so, here we go. Okay. Okay, so this was a good video, but it lacks his previous spark. I think he's working too much. Zelda classic, that's funny. Sure, Segan Hawks, let's see. Segan is a good name. I have like a sub to your channel.
Welcome back, everyone. You know, I've spent a lot of time on my channel talking about spooky fictional games, Petscop, Diminish. These are really great projects, but inevitably there's a level of interaction that stops with these projects. You can't actually play them. Their stories and scares are all viewed through the lens of someone else. But what if you were the one experiencing these mysteries inside of one of these games? Well, that's exactly the case with these two games I'll be talking about today, Basilisk. There's a little bit of background I should probably give on this project first, though, so let me boot that up. Alright, so the Basilisk games are a set of two experimental horror projects created by Akuma Kira, a developer you may be familiar with. Kira's most popular work would probably be Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion. They're also the developer behind Lost in Vivo, one of my favorite indie horror games that I actually made a really bad video about in 2019. Recently, I stumbled upon a project from them I hadn't heard of, the Basilisk NES ROM and the game Basilisk 2000. Now, these projects work a bit like Unfiction, in that everything about them, from their download pages to the content of the games themselves, are trying to get you to buy into the larger story around them. In reality, they're projects created by Akuma Kira in the past few years, but in the fiction of their worlds, they're retro games from the SNES era and the 2000s respectively, unfinished or incomplete recoveries of games now decades old, discovered, preserved, and uploaded on itch.io to allow them to be played on modern hardware. They are necessarily incomplete, meaning the story here isn't just that of the plot of the games, but also about the developers and the history around the IP. It also means we'll need to draw information from outside just the playable portions of the games. We'll need to search through the game's files, the documentation left by the people porting the games, and at times even decompile assets from the game to get a better understanding. I should also mention, these are firmly horror projects, so things are bound to get spooky. Alright, so we should probably start at the beginning, with the first game, Basilisk for the SNES. The best place to start would be with the itch.io page itself. The screenshots available here, along with the page's backdrop, showcase an ominous disposition. Dark woods, gloomy hallways, and cloaked figures. It appears to be a sort of pseudo-3D dark fantasy first-person dungeon crawler. The description on the page gives us a brief bit of context on the nature of the game. Basilisk is an unfinished RPG for the Super Nintendo, now mostly stable and playable through the very old SNES Y Plus emulator, or SNESy. You play as a noble knight from the Old Kingdom, sent down to solve the famine. Also available on the page is a 3D model of the original SNES cartridge. Through that description, we're starting to see what makes this game unique, and after downloading the file, it becomes even more clear just how unconventional this project is. Instead of booting you right into the game, you have to navigate through this Super Nintendo emulator interface. For those who don't know, emulators are pieces of software which allow you to play games from other systems by emulating those systems. Individual games are loaded into this software through ROM files. The technicalities aren't important. Emulators are used very commonly to play through retro games, and many emulators also allow for extra convenience features like save states, which allow you to save and load an exact state of the game at any time. For clarity, SNESy isn't a functional emulator. You can't boot any other ROMs with it. It's designed specifically to load the ROM file for Basilisk, but it does a good job of appearing like a legitimate Super Nintendo emulator. Loading our Basilisk ROM was greeted with an ominous title screen. A blood-red skeleton of a beast surrounded in darkness. Hitting start, a scroll slowly unfurls.
Oh, heart sign number 2.
1431 AD. Untold hardship befalls the kingdom. A time of famine. The king struggles to provide for his people and allocate food to the peasants. You, a simple knight, are dispatched to hear out the people. But it may be too late. When you arrive at town, it is not what you expected. The town is deserted, the buildings are gone, and there's a shrill howl in the air.
From here, we're loaded directly into the game. A low-res 3D world. A dark forest. Howling wind. The only thing to do is forge our way through the darkness. One little quirk about this game, and it may really be the only thing I don't particularly like about it, is that actually finding things in each of its levels is very tedious. You're surrounded by dense fog or darkness, so you can only see a short ways in front of you. You move incredibly slowly, each level's environments are incredibly easy to get lost or turned around in, and there is no direction. This tedium, I think, is a deliberate choice. This game is about discovery, finding pieces of this unfinished project, but it can be a little frustrating, and not in a particularly challenging way. It's more of a time sink than it is a puzzle to be solved in some respects. Still, I do think this is intentional. It wants you to commit to uncovering what lies in each environment, so commit we shall. Wandering for a while within these dark woods, you'll come across a cloaked figure who introduces himself as Scratch. He's a wanderer of sorts, and gives us a piece of advice, though we don't have all the context for its usefulness to us yet.
On your way to the ruin, you should be on the lookout. Crossing that space won't get you anywhere. The vein that connects the two worlds.
Cryptic. There are a couple other things we can find here, like this bizarre monolith.
The obelisk hums and emits warm sensation to the touch.
After exploring these woods for a while, you may begin to either run out of things to find or simply get bored with looking at the same trees. This is where those save states I was talking about come in handy. The SNESy interface shows 7 possible save states you can load, and in the README for the game, someone named Kyle Tudman explains that each save state is taken from developer notes, selected for us to load into to see the more completed sections of the game, or at least points of interest that the developer has. It seems like we're in state 0, so let's try loading 1.